All right, guys. So I just wanted to have this little thing available in case anybody was having any issues understanding the short story An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which is the one we started together on Tuesday. So this is just because I'm a visual person, it helps me. But when we were trying to describe on Tuesday what that first setting was in part one, you can see here, this is the railroad bridge. And then this guy right here, this would be Peyton Farquhar, the one who is standing on the plank. And on the other end is this captain. And for some reason, this man who looks like a gentleman is about to be hanged because there's a noose around his neck attached to a rafter up here by the federal or the Union Army. And so that's kind of what we got the description of in part one of this story. So I'm just going to do a really brief summary for those of you that weren't quite sure what happened, and then we'll go through the study notes questions together. So in the beginning, we started to point out the fact that, well, we didn't, I think we got to part two together, but the beginning of part two is a flashback. So this story shifts from the past for the present to the past and then back to the present. And so one of the things, and if you actually finish the story, hopefully this is not a spoiler review for you that did not, but focus on imagery, especially the passages in his present that describe things he's feeling and smelling and seeing that appeal to those five senses, because that has to do with a lot of the foreshadowing in the story. So again, just more images that kind of show you what this, at least the majority of the story, is taking place on this bridge over this stream. Here's all of the federal army on one of the banks. The other side of the bank is surrounded by trees. I think I have one more slides of images. Yeah, so this would have been Peyton Farquhar's view at the end of part one, which was when it said, and the captain prepared to step aside. So we have a flashback in part two, and I'll go over the textbook here in a second. But in part three, once he is supposed to have the noose hang him and break his neck, he actually falls through the rafters and he ends up in the stream. So maybe there was a problem with the rope or something. So that's just some images to help you. But to go through the story that we read together, or that you read on your own and we started together, like I said, part one was basically detailing the setting, the fact that there is this man that we don't really know why is about to be hanged or executed on this bridge. Part two was a flashback, and it tells us a little bit about Peyton Farquhar. And so for your guided notes sheet, if we look back at this, we definitely went over the first three in class. We started to give out some things about his personality, appearance, and background, but we found out a lot more about that in part two. So what we find out is that he is a Southern person. They use the word secessionist, meaning that he's definitely like one of those people behind the Confederate cause. He's a slave owner. We find out on the next page that for some reason, and this is right here, we don't really know why, but he was unable to enlist in the Confederate Army. But he is so passionately behind the Southern cause that he tries to help in any little ways that he can. So, we imagine whether it being like taking supplies for the troops or housing some troops, this is a guy who will do whatever it takes to help the Confederate cause because he believes in it. And the second part of this page where it talks about his flashback, he describes an evening where he and his wife are sitting outside, and there is a guy that is, it says right here, gray clad. So it doesn't really give us like what color that army is for, but he asks for a drink of water. So he sits and talks to Peyton Farquhar and his wife for a while, and basically Peyton Farquhar assumes he's a Confederate soldier because he's asking for water at this southern plantation, and the guy tells him that the Union Army, the North, has made it as far as Owl Creek Bridge, and they're fixing the railroad. They're preparing to build this little prison, and it's going to be bad news for the South, basically, if they can continue this progress. And then this guy, for some reason, throws out this little random hint and says, it's been really dry lately, though, and there's a bunch of lumber. So if somebody wanted to, stop their progress and not let the North repair this bridge, they could just go there and throw a match on it and it would burn up. And so knowing what we do about Peyton Farquhar, how much he cares about the Confederate cause, we can make a strong inference that he's going to do this. He's going to try and burn down the bridge. Now, one of the things that kind of is a big deal, and it's highlighted on this page, is again, we get this word federal scout at the end of part two. After this guy gets water, he rides away. Let's just say he goes off and he heads south. An hour later, they see him riding in the opposite direction. So our narrator tells us this is actually a Union spy. So he planted this information with this Southern plantation owner, Peyton Farquhar. So that's the information that we should put down for number three. Just he's a gentleman, slave owner, secessionist, really patriotic, loyal to the Confederate cause. For some reason, can't be in the Confederate Army, but we could say he's brave, he's determined, he's motivated. All those different things. All right, so when we get to part three, this is now asking us about the physical sensation. So we're taken back to the present moment for him where he's standing on this board waiting for the guy to set aside. And then all of a sudden, it says, it seems like ages later, there was a pressure on his throat. So again, there's some imagery to pay attention to. He describes what it feels like. He sees like a flash of light. Remember, he was watching this stream earlier in part one, and he says it's moving really slowly. He was watching this piece of wood. But all of a sudden, a lot of the things he's feeling, there's like this quick motion, this strong motion. He feels like he's in a pendulum or like a little, like maybe underwater hurricane. And all of a sudden he, in the purple part, it says he can think again, and he puts together the fact that the rope broke and he's fallen into the stream. So the next several pages describe his different feelings, how bad his neck hurts, how he's trying to hold his breath because he has to stay underwater because they're preparing to fire at him. He's watching different bugs, apparently, like even though his neck was just almost broken. It says he notes the prismatic colors in all the dewdrops upon a million blades of grass. The humming of the gnats danced above the eddies of the stream, beating the dragonfly's wings, the strokes of the water spider's legs. So for somebody that's going through this traumatic moment and should be only focused on survival, he's noticing a lot of things, right? Not just the way things feel to him, but also the way things look. While he's floating down a stream with a broken noose around his neck. So that should be something maybe you note down as foreshadowing for what comes at the end of the story. So he narrowly escapes not only drowning, but the captain or the federal troops that were on that bridge at the bottom of page 380, he says he starts to hear the cold, piteous, calm intonation enforcing the tranquility of those men with these cruel words. Attention, company, ready, aim, fire. So basically all these guys are getting ready. Since the noose didn't do the job, they're going to shoot him. And he kind of makes this inward comment like, oh, I don't want to be shot. Like, I'll drown or be hanged, but I don't want to be shot. And so page 381 is essentially his escape. He's able to dodge all of these bullets. He's rising to the top and gasping for air. So even though there's all of these trained soldiers on the bank shooting at him, this guy that is disoriented, he is able to escape. And he is eventually on page 382. He feels gravel, and he starts to notice different things about the forest that he runs into, because that was his whole plan when he was standing on the plank. If I could just reach the forest, I could run away home. So now all of a sudden on page 382, it's nightfall. He sees the house, this place that he has been trying to get home to. Another little piece of foreshadowing. Remember, in part two, when the federal scout asks, when he says, hey, how far away is this bridge? He says 30 miles. So we're supposed to believe at this point, almost the end of the story, that a guy who was almost hanged was just able to make it 30 miles with his injury. So more foreshadowing there. So again, he gets back. He's noticing all these things about his house. He's getting excited. He looks up at the sky. On the bottom, it says he notices that the stars are arranged in a very specific order. So he's looking at the constellation. He's noticing the noises of the woods. And then all of a sudden his neck really, really, really starts to hurt. And he feels really, really thirsty. And his tongue feels dry. And his eyes feel bloodshot. And for someone that just was able to make it 30 miles, all of a sudden these physical things catch up to him. And he says on the top of the page, he could no longer feel the road beneath his feet. So once we get to the point where now his wife is apparently walking out of the house, she's about to embrace him. Again, he said it was 30 miles and it's the middle of the night, but apparently his wife is awake and ready to embrace him. That's questionable. And by the time we get to the last sentence, it says, Peyton Farquhar was dead. His body, with a broken neck, swung gently from side to side beneath the timbers of the Owl Creek Bridge. So basically, what happened was he was imagining all of this. He was still imagining that fantastical escape that he might be able to have to get back to his home, his family. But none of that actually occurred. It was all in his mind. Within, like they say, your life flashes before your eyes before you die. Only instead of his life flashing before his eyes, his possible escape flashed before his eyes, but really the guy just stepped aside and Peyton Farquhar was killed. So that's the end of the story. So, in running back through some of these questions, the physical sensation he experiences, you can basically pick anything that happens from part 3 on, because again, we're looking for imagery. What are the things that he feels on that last page we talk about, like his tongue bulging, his eyes being bloodshot, his neck being sore. In the water, he talks about his hands and how they claw away at the noose around his neck and how his neck hurts so badly. So, just make sure you describe some of those things. All right, for after reading questions in section 1, he includes few details about the condemned man and does not reveal the reason he's to be hanged. How does that create suspense? Well, because we as the reader don't really know why he's there, and it makes us want to know more, because he's not just a soldier, he's dressed like a gentleman. So the lack of information kind of keeps us intrigued. It adds a sense of mystery. For part 2, or for question 2, it says, in section 2, Bierce introduces Peyton Farquhar. How does his decision to place this information in the middle contribute to the suspense and sympathy? Well, because he doesn't begin by telling us his quote-unquote crime or what this guy did wrong. Instead, he kind of sets it up. And I think it makes him more sympathetic, because they mention, as he's sitting there about to walk the plank, he's thinking of his family. And so that's something that deserves some sympathy. For number 3, why was he captured? Why did the Federal Scout lie? Well, he was captured because he apparently tries to burn down Owl Creek Bridge. Why did the Federal Scout lie? I'm not really sure that there's like a correct answer here. It's kind of what you think. Maybe he was setting a trap. Maybe he knew that this guy, because he was a slave owner, was probably someone that would try to do something crazy. Maybe he had done other things. And he had heard that this guy was a sympathizer with the Confederate Army. Um, we don't really know. Maybe the reason Ambrose Bierce even put that part in there is because it makes the Union Army seem kind of shisty. All right, for number 4, what details in part 3 suggest that his journey is occurring in his mind? I would accept anything here that kind of just reinforces the idea that it's very unbelievable. So he's looking at the stream in part 1 and it's moving slowly. Let all of a sudden this guy is shooting downstream in the water. You could just say it's really far-fetched, the fact that he's dodging all of these countless bullets. It's really far-fetched, the fact that the rope doesn't break. Or the rope breaks, and doesn't hang him on the spot, or that he's able to get away and run these 30 miles home. Number 5, the ultimate fate. What ends up happening to Peyton Farquhar? How long did it take the events of the story to unfold? Well, he gets hanged, so it took about a second in real time for the story to actually unfold, because the whole thing was in his mind. For this last part, this is something that is totally up to you. You need to find 3 different elements of foreshadowing, and you need to talk about how anything that suggests that him being dead the whole time, or about to die the whole time, you need to find hints that occurred within the story. So to go back to one of the examples I gave you, just the fact that at the end of part 1, when he's watching how slowly the wood is drifting down the stream, you could say that is foreshadowing, because later on he talks about how the stream kind of carries him away and there's this vortex and this, like circling underwater tornado. You might talk about an element of foreshadowing being the fact that there's all of these guys in the part 1 that are they're not holding their weapons, like getting ready to fire. It's more of a ceremony thing. Yet all of a sudden the captain's able to start commanding them to shoot and fire at will. So there's a lot of different foreshadowing things. You could pick out any of the physical sensations that he has. You could pick out any of the details that he's noticing, like the dragonfly's rings, or how bright the grass is, or looking at the constellations, because all of these are things that don't really make sense for a guy that would be beat up, or that would be, singularly focused on getting home. So that's just going over Owl Creek Bridge. So I hope this helped.